Hi, good morning, everyone. We'll get started in just about a minute so folks can trickle in. All right. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for being here today. In today's Field Updates episode, we're focusing on the Immigrant Legal Defense Act, particularly what this bill actually does, why it matters, and we'll start with a brief overview of the bill so that you folks can get well acquainted with it, and that you also hear directly from a community leader about why passing this legislation is so important and what they're seeing on the ground, every single day, and how this bill can make a difference and expand capacity to serve the people that we all care about. But first, let me tell you a bit of the Protecting Massachusetts Communities Campaign coalition. This is a broad coalition of advocates, labor partners, lawyers, faith leaders, and directly impacted immigrants who have come together to respond to the deepening harm caused by federal immigration enforcement. Next slide, please. So, about this particular bill, at its core, this bill is rooted in a simple but powerful idea, and that is no one should have to face detention or deportation alone without a lawyer standing beside them. So the Immigrant Legal Defense Act, or ILDA as we call it here at MIRA, it would establish a permanent statewide program to be able to provide no-cost immigration legal defense for low-income immigrants in Massachusetts who are at imminent risk of deportation, especially those being held in federal immigration detention. Right now, there is no right to a government-paid attorney in immigration court. That means that thousands of people are forced to navigate incredibly complex proceedings by themselves. And going up against government-trained attorneys is very difficult. We just want to be able to level the playing field to give everyone an opportunity and a fighting chance to be able to resolve their case. We know that immigrants with lawyers are 5 times more likely to win relief from deportation, and those who are detained are 10 times more likely to succeed in their cases. So those numbers tell us a very clear story. By passing ILDA, Massachusetts would level that playing field, and it would ensure that ordinary residents aren't left to stand alone in a system that is stacked against them. And it represents a smart and strategic investment in the due process of our immigration system. So very quickly, many of you folks are wondering who would benefit from such legislation. And as I mentioned, it would be low-income immigrants that are facing deportation. But at the same time, we're not just talking about one individual. We have to look at this as a family unit, right? We're talking about families and children. When someone has legal representation, it reduces the chances of the family from being separated or causing other issues such as homelessness or a child being pulled into the child welfare system. And in many cases, this is about keeping families breadwinners at home. Oftentimes, the person who is deported is the breadwinner and putting families in very precarious situations. So allowing them to have legal counsel can help prevent that from happening. At the same time, there are other folks who would benefit, from this legislation. Last year, MIRA had its annual membership meeting, and as we're comprised of 150 plus membership organizations, they overwhelmingly voted to, for us to advocate for such legislation and such program. And through many of those conversations, many nonprofits, legal organizations, and accredited representatives mentioned that this type of legislation would complement the work that they're doing. Oftentimes we lack immigration attorneys, or a lot of nonprofits are are unable to meet the capacity needs. So we're hoping that this fund would help them achieve just that. And the good news is we were able to secure $5 million for the Immigration Legal Defense Act in the Massachusetts budget, and that we're working on implementing that, and we hope to share some updates in a future field update about this, on how it's being rolled out and implemented as well. And while you're probably wondering why, if we have secured the $5 million, then why are we still pushing for a standalone bill? Well, it's quite simple. Immigration cases don't just last a few months. They go beyond just that. Some of them can take close to a year or more, depending on the person's case. Every immigration case is unique, and we can't let the $5 million be subject to the ups and downs of the legislature. And so we want to make this permanent, and it would also create an advisory council, right? The needs of immigrants across the Commonwealth change over time, and we want to make sure that community nonprofits, healthcare centers, lawyers, and community leaders and community-based organizations have input in those needs over time to best direct how these funds are used, but with the goal of always helping low-income immigrants be able to access to counsel, specifically those in deportation and those in detention. And with that being said, 8 states have very similar programs, and 58 and counting organizations across the Commonwealth have endorsed such legislation. And this is one of the priority protections as part of the Protecting Massachusetts Communities campaign as well, that will continue to push forward. So with all that being said, I just want to move over to our next segment and introduce a wonderful individual that I've had the pleasure of knowing for many years, Patricia Sobalvarro. Thank you so much for being here, Patricia. It's such a pleasure to have you here today. And if you could please just introduce yourself to our viewers and the organization you represent and what your organization does for our community.
Thank you, Gil. Thank you. Such a pleasure and such a joy to be here with you, and so grateful for all the amazing work that the MIRA Coalition does. We are a very proud member of this coalition, and Agencia Alpha has been in existence for almost 24 years. We are immigrant and women-led, and since inception, our focus has always been to fight for just immigration laws. We have an accredited legal representative that serves close to 1,200 individuals per year. We teach citizenship classes to ensure that people know that that has rights and privileges and the importance of speaking on behalf of others. And we do so much under our community organizing umbrella, from leadership development to youth, adult, working with coalitions like the MIRA Coalition to fight for these bills that are so needed. And we're also have a department that allows individuals to receive information on healthcare and just navigate all these complex laws. So thanks for having me here today.
Of course, absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing about the great work that you folks are doing in the community and fighting, for immigrants in general. But before, we get started to talk a little bit more about why this bill, could be helpful and your thoughts and opinions, I would just love to know why you're in this fight and what brings you to doing this kind of work.
I think, I always ask myself, as an immigrant, in the role that I have right now as an advocate, what would I be doing if I had the opportunity? And I always come back to the fact that this is where I need to be, right? I've been blessed to have almost grown up in this country, but I have so many family members who have struggled to get here, and they work so hard to put food on the table for their children and their family members. So it's such a personal issue for me. So anytime there's an opportunity to fight on behalf of our immigrant community, I'm thinking it's like as if I was fighting for my own family. So it's a very personal issue. And I think that the more we can acknowledge that, I think the better we will be.
No, thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that part of yourself, and for the good reminder that we should always be willing to fight for someone we don't know, including our neighbors, because at the end of the day, our society is much better for it, for sure. So, to sort of get into the nitty gritty here, and the work that you mentioned earlier. So in your day-to-day work, what are the most common, situations where you see community members facing deportation or detention without a lawyer? I know that you folks provide legal services, but, are there times where an individual may not be able to afford it, or they just don't know where to go? So talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So out of the 1,200 individuals that we see on a yearly basis, more than 50-60% of individuals that come through our door are always asking for information, whether it's for their cases or a family member. And a great majority are individuals that are telling us, I've been in the country for a long time and I just don't know what to do. Can I apply for something? And then, we start talking about their case. We're trying to do that triage. And then unfortunately, we discover for many individuals, they may have open deportation proceedings, or there are other things in their background that may not allow them to do a straightforward, application for a benefit. Or what has been happening in the last year or so is the fact that we get frantic calls from family members telling us that, mom or dad were on their way to work and all of a sudden they were picked up by ICE. So we have also seen it firsthand, how people just on their daily routines going to work, they're being detained. People that are going into these, places like Home Depot, or they're just walking down the street in East Boston, or they're having a coffee at a certain place. They're the target of this horrific immigration enforcement. So it is very difficult to know that Agencia Alpha can do so much for the immigrant community, but at the same time that we have so many limitations because we're not able to represent these cases in court. And that's where part of the frustration comes from, that we want to be able to help individuals, but there is a place for that. And there's the other place that only an attorney can fulfill. So, I'm so grateful to know that a year ago, this was just a dream to have this legal defense a reality. And the fact that we have been able to secure $5 million, it's amazing, but it's not enough. As you said earlier, many of these cases take 12, 18 months. So this is a long-term battle.
No, thank you. Thank you so much, for sharing that. And, something, and maybe you can speak to this, the idea behind, this particular bill is oftentimes what we see, and maybe you see this too, and in the Latino community, they're called notario fraud, or notary publics who pretend to be immigration lawyers, or pretend to be someone who understands immigration benefits. And, my understanding is that a lot of folks out there, families, save money for months, maybe even years, to be able to finally speak to someone who claims to know the immigration law and how to fill out these benefits, to later find out that either an application was never submitted, so they were cheated and scammed, and others, were told that an application was submitted, but it was done completely wrong. And it isn't until months later that they'll get a letter in the mail saying that you have been put into deportation proceedings and that they must appear for ICE. Do you see that often in the community?
More often than I wish I did. And there's a new trend that we started to notice since last September. For some reason, a lot of the constituents that we were serving, I don't understand why, but they managed to get a hold of these individuals that were not even here in Massachusetts. I can't tell you how many, and it's more than 10, but there were so many individuals that used somebody in Florida. So sometimes they're just getting information from a friend or a relative. And I want to start by saying that a notary public, it's not that they're not the monsters, right? They're nice, well-intentioned individuals that want to help. Some of them and others do take advantage of our community, but a notary public has not gone through law school. They haven't passed the bar exam. They perhaps haven't even received like basic fundamental workshops or knowledge. So it is really taking advantage of someone in a very vulnerable position. We saw so many individuals that wanted to or had applied for asylum through someone that had no idea how difficult it is to prove that someone, has a credible fear. So I think, and we know this, Gil, that our immigrant community is so desperate, and the only thing they want is to be able to work. And the only thing that they want to do, anything impossible, is to get that work permit. So they think, well, let me just submit this application and I'll deal with the consequences later. And that's the problem, right? Because you need someone to truly explain to them the consequences down the road. And notary publics don't do that. They can't. They're not lawyers.
No, I appreciate the clarification and for explaining, that. And for the viewers on here, what I want you to know is that immigration lawyers can actually practice immigration law all across the country because it is a federal matter. So that's why you see people even from the Commonwealth reaching out to individuals in other states because they're able to practice in these, federal venues, if you will, and that's why you have that. But it's a great reminder, Patricia, to let the public know to just be aware and verify and make sure that what you're being told is accurate and correct. And it's very important to get that message out there as well. And I know sometimes private law firms will ask for a retainer before they can even review a case. And I know that sometimes that can be up to thousands and thousands of dollars, right? And that's why many families struggle to access counsel in the first place. And we're hoping with this program that it would make it at least people get a screening of their case to be told whether they have a path or not. And even just getting that answer alone, whether they don't have a path, sometimes is extremely helpful to the individual so that they can reassess with their family on what to do next. And I'm curious if you've had those conversations, before. Anything you would like to add about that message?
Yes. That's what I was trying to get at earlier, that so many individuals that use our services, we're very happy that we're able to at least sit with them and say, okay, tell me about your background. When did you come into the country? How did you come in? Do you have any family members who maybe U.S. citizens? Let's figure out if there are any short or long-term benefits or paths for you. So we try to chart out a path for them. But there are some individuals that, like I said earlier, perhaps they have open deportation proceedings, or they, made some bad choices, and there's some things in their file that they need to clear up. There's so many times that we'll be able to do that triage. We'll be able to explain the law. We're going to be able to help them for them to make that final decision. But as a nonprofit organization that has accredited legal representatives, we have limitations. And that's where our frustration comes in, because then oftentimes we're left with the choice of telling people, we're going to give you a number of a pro bono organization, but more than likely, before we used to tell them, you'll have to wait a couple of months. Now, maybe you may have to wait more than 4 or 5 months, or perhaps they don't have the capacity, or here's a list of private attorneys, but beware, they are going to charge you thousands of dollars. So our community is left with, well, you know what? I'm going to go to my cousin's friend who's a notario because he'll be able to fill that application for me, because all I want is that work permit. So it's really disheartening to know that financially, it's the reason why our community falls victim and they reach the help of people who really are not attorneys or DOJ reps.
No, thank you so much for sharing that. And, for the viewers out there, there are 8 states that already have implemented such a program to level the playing field for many of these, families that are going up against, trained, Department of Homeland Security, lawyers who have every detail about you. And then you have to come and you have to, explain to them why you're deserving, or why you should remain here to seek that relief. So I'm hopeful that such a statewide program can help many families. So I appreciate you sharing the work that you do, sort of the challenges that you've come across and seen. And if you had the opportunity, which I think you will, to explain to lawmakers something that they that you wish that you want them to understand about our immigration court system, what that they may not realize? Because at the end of the day, a lot of folks, immigration is a federal matter, and a lot of the people that we're doing a lot of legislative advocacy with, et cetera, are state lawmakers from the state, right? So they're not always, up to speed with what's happening, on immigration law, especially in an environment where it's constantly changing. So they look to community organizations such as yours for that input. So what is something that you wish that they would walk away to understand about our immigration system and our immigration court system?
I think coalitions like MIRA and other allies have been doing a wonderful job at educating our elected officials that, unlike the criminal system, immigrants are not appointed in a legal defense. So for that reason, you have those statistics, right? That many of our immigrant communities have to then basically they're on their own in a very literal way to defend themselves. And here you have the government, with all these power attorneys, and they have their briefings and they have their data and they have their arguments. And then you have an undocumented individual who is really on their own, and they have no idea how to present their case or even defend the reason why they're in the country. So that is the one, I think that's the biggest challenge that we had to overcome, or that we continue need to tell our elected officials, that immigrants don't get a court appointed attorney. And that would be a big game changer, right? Because we also have seen many children accompany minors who had to fend for themselves in their court proceedings. Yeah, that's a very powerful and very clear and concrete example of what I would imagine happens in these courts.
Yeah, no, I think that's a powerful reminder. And the way I see this, Bill, and I hope that you do too, is that this is really an investment in the due process of individuals, right? Because everyone should be, entitled to be able to fight their case in court. And without that access to counsel, folks are just then put into these deportation proceedings, detention for God knows how long. And then after that, they might be, deported to, either their native country, or in this case, with this administration, to a different country, right? And so we just want to give people the fighting chance to level that playing field, if you will.
May I just say one more thing, Gail?
Yes,
I think what's important to highlight here that we haven't really said much on it is that many of these individuals we're talking about are individuals that have been in the country for many years, right? These are our business owners who are producing, creating jobs for others, or these are our church leaders who provide spiritual guidance, or these are our soccer coaches taking care of our community kids. These are individuals that are truly in the country because they want to bless this nation. So, and many of them have been paying taxes through their IT numbers. So it's not like we're asking for free things. I think this is one way to honor the hard work of our immigrant brothers and sisters. And again, I'm not saying 100% of them, that's the case, but the great majority of our immigrant brothers and sisters are hardworking, law-abiding residents that the only crime they have committed is trying to give their kids a better future. So it is an investment in their lives, because while we always give back, probably even in higher capacities.
No, and I appreciate you mentioning that. I always reflect on this too. I'm so grateful that I have the opportunity to live in this country, and to be the first person in my family, to go to college, to get a master's degree, and to own a home, etc. And all I look forward to is giving back to our communities. That we're able to do that. And the difference between me and so many other people, and I know this goes for you, is that we don't turn our backs on folks. We bring that ladder down so that they can come with us to build a greater society. So I really appreciate that perspective as well. And I think I may have asked you this question, Patricia, in the beginning. But despite the challenges and the fear that you're seeing in the community, What gives you hope in all of this?
I think about the history of this country, that what our immigrant community from, I work predominantly with Latin America and Caribbean communities. What we're going through is nothing new, right? It has happened since, the foundation of this country. And throughout the country, throughout the history, we see that that people are resilient, because at the end of the day, all they're trying to do is to give to their family, to do things because they do it for love. So as I reflect on that, I just have to, say, okay, today may not have been a good day, but I'm looking forward to tomorrow. And hopefully tomorrow will be a better day. And it has to go down in the history books that our immigrant community overcame this dark time in our history. And I think we will. I think, Gail, you know this, that we're made up of, this resiliency and love for family, and we appreciate the goodness that this country has given us. And all we want to do is come back home after a long, hard day of work and hug our loved ones. And I think if I think about that, that's what makes me want to continue to fight the good fight. And for that reason, fighting for bills like this one, Hilda and others, is it's not something that you take lightly. This has to happen, because if we, as a woman of faith, I always think about how do I express God's love to others. And many of our community members, elected officials, and people in the community share some of those values. And it's like, well, you know what? This is one way to show love for your neighbors. So passing the Immigrant Legal Defense Act, it's the right thing to do. And I really hope that it happens, because it's the right thing to do.
I appreciate that so much, Patricia. And, I want to be mindful of your time as well. And I just want to give you the opportunity, if there's, any other points that we didn't cover in today's, conversation that you wish to, highlight for our viewers today. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I do want to, I just want to quickly share a story that has broken our hearts. Couple of months ago, we received a call from a frantic community member, and she basically said, my husband left home this morning for work, and I haven't heard from him, and I'm not having a good feeling about this. So you can imagine where we went with that, right? So we started calling different law enforcement agencies, and as a family, they started to also make phone calls, and then we realized he was picked up. It was horrible, because a few miles down the road, the wife found the car and the keys inside. And obviously you always think, well, what happened? Was somebody, did somebody kidnap him, or was he really taken by ICE? And I often wonder how things would have been different if something like the Legal Defense Fund had been in place and he had access to an attorney, because unfortunately, since he didn't have the financial means and he didn't have the right counsel at the time, he was not only arrested, detained, and he was deported to his country. Now, the family is very seriously considering moving back to a country that is filled with violence and political turmoil. Their child is a U.S. citizen, so I also think how unfair it is that this child, the U.S. citizen, is not going to have access to all these programs and access that he has as a U.S. citizen. Again, because this family just didn't have access to a legal defense attorney. So stories like that really is what fuels me to want to continue fighting for these bills. So I'm so grateful to you, for your leadership, what MIRA is doing. And I really hope that, our friends who are, tuning into this podcast could also help us. I don't know if you're going to mention that there's going to be a lot of activities happening in the future, but we need all the support we can get to contact our elected officials.
No, first of all, thank you for sharing that important story. I think it's always helpful to provide a concrete example. This is not just something that exists conceptually, but it's something that is actually happening to people. These are real people with real lives. They're just not a statistic in this administration's, deportation Excel sheet, if you will, right? And it has significant impact to have access to counsel. And I think my last question here, and just to sort of set the context a little bit in general, is, a lot of folks, I've noticed that there's a lot of a lack of empathy, right now for individuals. And I don't know if this is like a post-COVID thing, because we're all still trying to recover from that. I know that took a lot from us in general. But my question, and something that I have seen too, is most people don't really think of our immigration system until they have to go through it themselves. In the past, when I used to work for an organization, helping people navigate our complex immigration system, I used to sometimes get calls from individuals, including veterans themselves, who were just trying to bring their loved one, a spouse from another country, and they would tell us, why is our system so difficult? Why isn't it more efficient? And why is everything so expensive? And I'm just curious if you've come across that, or what would you tell people who have never, dealt with our immigration system, that they should care about this?
It's one of the biggest contradictions this country has to offer, because on one hand, people who are outside looking in, they're like, oh, look at all these companies offering jobs, and there's so many ways to make money, so I'm going to go and work. And so the U.S. in one way is saying, yeah, come to the U.S., come to the U.S. But on the other hand, our immigration system is so broken, so obsolete, right? It's not at the same level of demand that our labor force needs. So because we're not updating our immigration laws, it's forcing people to come to the U.S. through other means. I think of so many of my clients who are from the Philippines. They have to wait more than 15, 20 years to try to get a sibling to come to the U.S. I think about right now with the latest changes to the green card process, or the visa, or the consular process. This administration now is going to discriminate against anyone who may be elderly, or may have diabetes, or may be overweight. And they're going to make the process even more strict for these individuals to be able to get that visa or green card. So it's a combination of a broken immigration system, that it's not up to par with the labor demands. And it's also the fact that both Republicans and Democrats have failed at realizing that for this country to thrive, you need to make changes to our immigration system. This whole concept of family reunification really hit hard, because people are separated because of the horrific laws that we have right now, whether they're federally or nationally.
No, I appreciate that, and thank you, so much. And I just want to thank you for being on today's, field updates episode. And I hope that we can have you return again. For the viewers out there, what I would like to say is that our immigration system is so vast. Immigrants experience it very differently based on your status, the type of category, et cetera. I always say that even if you're an immigration lawyer, you may be an expert in deportations and detention, but that doesn't necessarily make you an expert in, business immigration or family reunification applications, right? It's that vast and that complex. And I hope by these episodes and bringing community leaders like Patricia onto this can help shed a little bit of light and make that real for you as well. So, Patricia, I just want to thank you so much for being on here today and for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you, Gail. And again, I just want to appreciate you and everything that the MIRA Coalition does. You guys are truly our heroes out there in the community. So thank you for having me.
No, thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.
For the viewers, I just want to let you know that on Tuesday, November 25th at 9 a.m., we will be having a pre-hearing rally at the Massachusetts State House. In that, there will be public hearings on all pro-immigration bills, and as part of the Protecting Massachusetts Communities, we will be showing up to testify and show our support on the 3 priority protections that we've been advocating for, and that is to not assist ICE, to not allow our police officers to become extensions of ICE, and to fund legal funds for immigrants facing deportation and detention proceedings. And so I hope we can see you there and count on you to be there. So take care, and thank you for tuning in today.